Savannah arrived early the next morning. She hadn't slept much. Her mind had cycled through every reason to back out: status, class, awkwardness, rumors. But none of them outweighed the soft weight of Luca's head on her shoulder or the quiet, unmistakable feeling that someone needed her. She stepped off the elevator in her janitor uniform, light blue polo shirt, worn work pants. It was all she had. The executive floor greeted her with cold elegance: glass walls, art installations no one could name, and a silence so crisp it might snap. Damon was already there, phone in hand, back turned to the window, voice clipped with business urgency. When he saw her, he ended the call. "Good morning," he said. His eyes flicked briefly to her uniform, then to the child in her arms. No comment, no judgment, just a nod of thanks. "This little guy's the only reason I'm awake before sunrise," Savannah replied, half joking. Her voice wavered slightly, nerves wrapped in a smile. Damon reached for Luca, but the baby whimpered, clung tighter to Savannah's neck. "Looks like my son's made his choice," Damon said, a dry chuckle slipping through. She exhaled quietly. No reprimand, no awkward silence, just an unspoken agreement. This was the new arrangement. In the corner of Damon's expansive office, a small play area had been hastily assembled overnight. A colorful mat, a few soft toys, and a rattle still in its packaging. It looked out of place, like someone had tried to childproof a bank vault. "Can I sit on the floor?" Savannah asked, already easing down with Luca in her arms. "Of course," Damon replied. And just like that, the day began. For nearly an hour, the only sounds in the office were the gentle jingles of toys, Savannah's soft humming, and the occasional delighted squeal from Luca. Damon typed, took meetings, read reports, but his eyes often drifted toward the floor, toward the woman in a faded uniform, legs folded beneath her, singing lullabies as if she were in her own living room. Savannah felt it too, the shift. In the community center back in Texas, the air had been chaotic: shouting kids, echoing whistles, spilled juice. Here, it was controlled, sterile, quiet. But for the first time, she felt acknowledged. That scared her more than being ignored ever had. Later that week, as Luca napped in her lap, Damon stepped away from his desk and settled on the couch nearby. He watched silently for a moment, then said, "You make everything easier to breathe." Savannah glanced at him. "Only with babies. Adults? Still a mystery." He smiled faintly, then looked away. "I used to think I had emotions under control, but then my marriage fell apart." She didn't answer, just continued stroking Luca's hair. She said I was cold, absent, that I buried myself in work to avoid being a father. "And were you?" she asked gently. Damon didn't flinch. "Probably." Savannah nodded slowly. "My mom raised me and my sister alone. She worked 3 jobs, but what I remember most is her sitting on the floor playing dolls with me." Damon turned to look at her. She didn't flinch either. The following days fell into a quiet rhythm. Savannah became part of the office's background hum, like the soft click of a mechanical clock. She wasn't flashy, didn't try to impress. She was just there, calm, observant, present. And Damon noticed. He noticed the way she identified Luca's cries like she was reading sheet music. The soft whimper meant fatigue. The sharp squeal, hunger. The long, drawn-out wail, emotional, needing comfort. "I thought crying was just noise," Damon admitted once. "A lot of adults do," she replied. "But if you really listen, you hear what they're trying to say." And Damon, to his own surprise, began listening. Not just to Luca, but to the silences between Savannah's words, to her pauses, her carefulness, her restraint. He ordered new cushions for the play area, left coffee on her desk without comment, stayed later than necessary, even when the work was done. No declarations, no theatrics, just presence. And sometimes, that was louder than any speech. One Friday evening, the office was unusually quiet. The wind outside had shifted, autumn's edge slipping through the glass in quiet drafts. Luca had caught a fever, not high, but enough to make him cling to Savannah like a shipwreck to driftwood. She didn't leave. She didn't even ask. She sat in the play area, rocking him gently, a warm cloth pressed to his forehead. Hours passed. Damon finished a late call, expecting to walk her out. Instead, he found her asleep, seated against the couch, head tilted, hair soft around her face. In her arms, Luca slept, one tiny fist clutching her shirt. The fever had settled. Her hand still cradled him, instinctively protective, even in sleep. Damon froze. He didn't speak. He didn't move. Something in him, something armored, orderly, scheduled, cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, but undeniably. He walked over, retrieved a soft blanket from the closet, and gently draped it over her shoulders. His hand paused, briefly, above her cheek. Then he walked away. No words were exchanged. But the room had changed. So had he. In the following weeks, Savannah found herself navigating new territory. Her hands trembled more than usual when Damon stood nearby. His glances lingered longer. His tone softened. And hers? She didn't dare examine it too closely. But she smiled more. Laughed when she didn't mean to. Damon, once known for robotic precision, became a man who sat on the office floor at 3 p.m. just to hear his son babble nonsense. The baby, once inconsolable, now giggled freely. Savannah, once invisible, now felt seen. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was close. And then, as always, came the return of reality. She arrived in heels that didn't tolerate imperfection and a coat that whispered boardroom dominance. Vanessa Clark, co-founder, shareholder, former partner, in business and in life. Savannah stood quickly. Vanessa surveyed her like an art critic unsure whether to be impressed or insulted. And you are? Savannah. I help with Luca. I see. There was a pause. Waited. Cleaning staff, Savannah added. Before that, community work. Vanessa smiled, tight, deliberate. Fascinating. Not many janitors get promoted to CEO babysitter. Savannah felt the burn beneath her skin. She held Luca tighter. Moments later, Damon entered. His expression flickered. Surprise, concern, a trace of dread. Vanessa wasted no time. We need to talk. Privately. They stepped into the meeting room. The door didn't fully close. Savannah didn't mean to listen. But silence, sometimes, is louder than shouting. She's a liability, Vanessa said. She's a human being. She's bad optics. Investors don't want Cinderella stories. They want control. She's the only one who understands my son. Then find someone trained, certified, photogenic. Savannah didn't hear the rest. She didn't need to. The look, the tone, the place she wasn't meant to occupy. That night, she held Luca longer than usual, kissed his forehead softly, left a note on Damon's desk. No goodbye, just gratitude. And the next morning, she was gone. The sound began, as these things always do, like a gentle disturbance, sharp, repetitive, vaguely biological. A baby crying. On the 37th floor of Millennium Heights, a building where nothing was supposed to be out of place. This was no ordinary high-rise. It was a monument to ambition, polished marble floors, glass walls thick enough to block out weather, and an elevator system smart enough to remember your name. The kind of place where silence was part of the architecture. So when the baby began crying, it echoed in a way that felt indecent. Most of the building's occupants responded predictably. They walked faster, eyes fixed on phones, Bluetooth earpieces snug in place. Not my child, not my problem, not my floor. But one person stopped. Her name was Savannah Brooks, 29, janitor, worn shoes, hair in a tight ponytail, and a small spray bottle clipped to her belt like a badge of quiet resilience. She had just finished scrubbing a coffee stain someone in a $3,000 suit had graciously left near the panoramic window. She paused. The sound was unmistakable, somewhere near the elevators. She glanced over. No adult in sight, just a stroller. And in it, a baby, no more than 8 months old, red-faced, fists flailing, legs kicking against the air like he was trying to protest the very concept of abandonment. Savannah looked around. A few people passed. None slowed. A woman in heels hesitated, checked her watch, then disappeared into a meeting room. A man with a Bluetooth earpiece scowled as if the child had insulted his calendar. No one else approached, which meant it was up to her. She set her mop aside, wiped her hands on her apron, walked slowly toward the stroller. This was, to be clear, a breach of protocol, not legally, perhaps, but socially. She was stepping out of her assigned role, crossing an invisible line. The kind people at Millennium Heights didn't acknowledge but never failed to enforce. She crouched beside the baby, speaking softly. Hey there, who left you all alone? The baby didn't answer, obviously, but his eyes, wet, frantic, locked on hers. The crying slowed, just slightly. Savannah's own expression softened. She'd seen that look before, not just in infants. She reached out, gently lifted him. He didn't resist, just collapsed into her shoulder, crying still, but quieter. Less fury, more fatigue. "It's okay now," she whispered, rubbing his back in slow circles. The crying returned in bursts, then settled. Savannah looked around again. Still no sign of a parent, or a nanny, or anyone pretending to care. She rocked him gently, thinking. Then she remembered something. From the pocket of her coat, she pulled out a small plastic bottle. Bubble solution. A ridiculous trinket her nephew had handed her last week, insisting it was magic. Well, worth a shot. She dipped the wand, brought it to her lips. 1, 2, 3. Bubbles floated up, shimmering in the bright morning light streaming through the window. They drifted lazily, catching sunbeams like tiny planets with no urgency to land. The baby fell silent. He watched, eyes wide, mouth open slightly, as if he'd never seen anything so beautiful. As if, just maybe, he hadn't. Savannah smiled. A real one. Not the forced smile of someone paid to be invisible, but a smile of someone who'd created peace. Even for just a moment. She kept blowing. He kept watching. And just a few feet away, behind the mirrored doors of an elevator, someone else was watching too. Damon Walsh, CEO, tech entrepreneur. The kind of man whose calendar had its own assistant. The kind of man who didn't take elevators, he summoned them. He had come to pick up his son, Luca, after what was supposed to be a routine wellness check with the nanny. But the nanny, it turned out, had abandoned the mission. Unclear when or why. Just gone. And now, there she was. Not the nanny, the janitor, sitting cross-legged on the marble floor, blowing bubbles to calm his son like it was the most natural thing in the world. Not rushing. Not worried about who saw. Not asking for permission. Luca, once inconsolable, was now quiet. Reaching out. Mesmerized. Damon didn't move. He watched. His mind, normally sharp, delayed a beat or two before processing what he felt. It wasn't just gratitude. It was discomfort. Not with her. With himself. The elevator doors slid open. Savannah looked up. Their eyes met. She froze. A second of pure silence passed between them. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but dense, pregnant with assumptions, questions, and the kind of awkwardness that only arises when status meets empathy on equal footing. I'm sorry, she said quickly, adjusting the baby in her arms. He was alone. I didn't mean to. You don't need to apologize, Damon said, voice low and clear. Actually, thank you. She nodded, unsure what came next. She moved to hand Luca over. The baby, predictably, began crying again. Instantly. Loudly. He reached back for Savannah, face crumpling. They both froze. Savannah hesitated. I guess he's used to me now. Damon looked at his son, then at her. You're the first person who's gotten him to stop crying in days. A pause. You work here. Cleaning staff. Morning shift. Another pause. You ever work with kids? She nodded. Community center. Back in Texas. Infants, after-school programs. I had to leave it when I moved here. Damon exhaled slowly. A businessman's exhale. Measured. Analytical. My nanny quit. I've been trying to find someone trustworthy. Would you consider watching him, just temporarily? Savannah blinked. Me? Yes. Just during office hours. I'll pay you fairly. Better than what you're making now. She looked at the baby. Then at Damon. He didn't look like a man who asked for help often. But here he was. Asking. She thought of her paycheck. Of the bills waiting at home. Of her sister and the newborn she was helping support. Of how Luca had rested against her shoulder like it was the only safe place in the world. Just temporarily, right? She asked. Damon nodded. Or longer, if you choose. She didn't answer right away. But in her silence, something began. Not love. Not luck. Just a quiet, undeniable shift. She had crossed a line. But this time, no one asked her to go back. There's a certain tempo to high-rise life. Meetings begin on the hour, coffees arrive by the minute, and no one, absolutely no one, sits on the floor. And yet, by the second week, Savannah was doing exactly that. Same floor, same child, different rules. The once silent executive office had found new sounds. The soft jingle of toys, Luca's delighted squeals, Savannah's occasional humming, and, most shockingly of all, laughter. Not loud, not forced. Just real. Damon Walsh, the man who used to move through the office like a specter in an expensive suit, now lingered longer, watched more closely, and smiled. Not the polite, corporate kind, but the private, involuntary kind that surprised even him. Savannah, for her part, remained careful. She brought no demands, no expectations, no conversation that wasn't necessary. But her presence shifted the air. She listened, not just to Luca's cries, but to Damon's silences. And slowly, without permission or pretense, she became the emotional center of a floor designed to avoid emotion altogether. The change didn't go unnoticed. It never does. She arrived on a Thursday, sharp heels, tailored coat, and a face that looked like it had been drawn by a committee of designers and litigators. Vanessa Clark, co-founder, major shareholder, former partner, romantic, strategic, and otherwise. The air changed the moment she walked in. Colder, cleaner, like someone had turned on the boardroom setting for the building's mood lighting. Savannah stood instinctively, baby on her hip. "And you are?" Vanessa asked, tone like glass over ice. "I'm Savannah. I help with Luca." "I see." Vanessa's gaze was efficient. Up, down, evaluation complete. Luca, on cue, crawled toward Savannah, squealing with recognition. She scooped him up reflexively. Protective, maternal, possibly naive. Vanessa smiled thinly. Fascinating. Not many companies promote janitors to CEO babysitter. Savannah said nothing, not because she lacked words, but because she knew better than to waste them. Moments later, Damon entered. He froze. "I didn't know you were coming." "I like surprises," Vanessa said smoothly. "We need to talk." They stepped into the glass conference room. The door didn't close completely. Savannah didn't move, but she heard. "You really think this is a good idea? She's done nothing wrong. She doesn't belong here. She's the only one Luca trusts. Investors won't care. You're a CEO? She's a cleaning lady with a playmat." Silence. "Then, she's a liability." Savannah stopped listening. She already knew how the rest of the sentence went. That evening, she stayed late. Not because she had to, because Luca had a mild fever again. And because leaving him now, just handing him off like a parcel, felt wrong. Damon had another meeting. The kind with shareholders and suits and digital graphs pretending to be reality. He said he'd walk her out after. But when he returned, the office was silent. She was asleep, seated on the floor against the couch. Luca curled in her lap, flushed with fever but peaceful. Her arm wrapped protectively around him. A warm cloth gently draped across his forehead. One hand still resting on his back, even in sleep. Damon didn't speak. He didn't wake her. He simply fetched a blanket and laid it over her shoulders, moving with the kind of reverence normally reserved for sacred places. Then he sat and watched and tried to remember the last time he had seen anything that looked like love. The next morning, Savannah didn't show up, nor the morning after. She was gone. All that remained was a neatly folded letter on Damon's desk. "Mr. Walsh, thank you for the opportunity. I never imagined someone would trust me this way. But some places aren't built for people like me. And I don't want to be a burden to you, or to Luca. He's the most precious child I've ever cared for. I hope you find someone better, someone who fits. Wishing you all the best. Savannah." Damon read the letter twice. Then again. He didn't move, didn't speak. And in the stillness of that executive floor, for the first time in a very long time, there was no sound. No laughter. No bubbles. No lullabies. Just absence. The kind that echoes. The kind that hurts. The silence settled like dust. The play corner was untouched, the toys still arranged in the precise pattern Savannah had left them. The fleece blanket remained folded neatly in the corner. The soft scent of chamomile tea, hers, lingered faintly in the air, like a ghost that hadn't realized it was no longer welcome. Luca noticed. Babies don't understand abandonment the way adults do, but they recognize absence. And he did. Loudly. He cried more. Slept less. Wouldn't eat unless coaxed. Wouldn't nap without a humming voice nearby. Wouldn't smile for anyone but her. Damon tried everything. Hired a new nanny. Then another. Then a professional infant therapist recommended by a venture capitalist's wife. They all failed. The problem wasn't technique. It was substitution. And Savannah wasn't replaceable. Vanessa returned the following afternoon, clipboard in hand, heels echoing like a metronome for bad news. "This is the media summary," she said, placing a thick black folder on Damon's desk. He opened it. Inside, surveillance screenshots, work history, public records, a few blurry photos of Savannah walking to the train at dawn. A quiet life, dissected for optics. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice low. "I'm protecting you," Vanessa replied, calm, precise. "And this company? We're days away from a $12 million investment round. The investors are watching everything. They want stability, not a Cinderella subplot." She pulled out another folder. "Here's the agreement. You sign this. I make all of this." She tapped the folder with Savannah's name. "Disappear. No scandal. No press leak. No man falls for janitor headlines. Just clean exits. Clean image." All Damon had to do was sign. He held the pen, looked at it, looked out the window. Remembered Savannah sitting cross-legged on the playmat, laughing at something Luca did, eyes soft, hands steady. Remembered the way she'd held his son when no one else could. The warmth, the quiet authority, the absence of ambition, replaced by presence. And he remembered her letter. "Some places aren't built for people like me." He set the pen down. "No." Vanessa blinked. "No, I'm not signing. Damon, I lost my family once by choosing numbers. I'm not doing it again." She exhaled sharply. "You're risking the entire round for someone who walked away without a word." "No," he said quietly. "I'm risking it for the only person who ever made this place feel like home." 2 weeks later, the investors pulled out. The board retaliated. The press speculated. And Damon Walsh, once the rising star of Chicago tech, was pushed out of his own company with a quiet headline and a golden parachute far lighter than expected. But he didn't regret it. He regretted something else entirely. Not following her. He found her address on the back of the letter. A barely legible return stamp. Western suburbs, a part of Chicago he'd never needed to visit. Until now. He drove himself. No driver. No assistant. No calendar alerts. Just an old hoodie and a quiet desperation that felt foreign in his chest. The apartment building was modest. Clean. Quiet. The kind of place where you buy groceries in plastic bags and neighbors nod, but don't linger. He knocked. The door opened. Savannah stood there, in a soft sweater, her hair undone, her face bare and startled. "Damon." He nodded. She didn't speak. Neither did he. Not at first. Then, "I'm sorry for coming unannounced." She opened the door wider. Inside, the apartment was small but warm. There was a faint smell of cinnamon and something baking. A baby cried softly in the next room. "Where's Luca?" he asked, stepping inside carefully. "Asleep," she said. "I'm helping my sister. Her newborn has colic." He nodded. She didn't ask why he was there, but the question hung between them. Until he answered it. "I lost the company," he said. She turned. "What?" "I wouldn't sign the agreement. I wouldn't erase you." Savannah stared at him. "I'm not here to ask for help," he added. "I'm here for the only thing I can't afford to lose." Silence. Then, "You and Luca." Her eyes glistened. But he wasn't finished. "Do you remember the app idea you mentioned? The one about decoding baby cries and behavior?" She nodded, cautiously. "I built it. Or, started building it. No investors. No PR. Just one goal. To help parents actually understand their kids." She blinked. "I want you to co-found it with me." A pause. Then, "That idea was just something I said. I didn't mean it seriously." "I did," Damon said. "I still do." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I left so I wouldn't be a burden." He stepped closer. "You were never a burden. You were the only one who made me want to be better." Silence stretched again, long, uncertain, heavy. Then, "I'm not asking you to come back because I need a babysitter. I'm asking because I love you. No contracts. No PR moves. Just a man who knows he almost missed the best thing in his life." Savannah looked away, then looked back. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Her arms opened, and Damon stepped into them. Not as a CEO, not as a fixer, just a man. And that was enough. 6 months later, the tech world had a new darling. Heart Signals, an app that used AI and behavioral data to decode infant needs, cry types, body cues, sleep patterns. Simple, practical, revolutionary. But the real buzz wasn't just the tech. It was the co-founders. Damon Walsh, fallen star turned founder again. And Savannah Brooks, former janitor, now visionary. At the company's debut launch event, the room was packed. Investors who had once dismissed Damon now leaned forward in their chairs. Media outlets live-streamed. Cameras clicked like applause. Savannah stood at the podium, an ivory dress clinging awkwardly to her borrowed confidence. Her voice trembled only slightly. Heart Signals wasn't born in a lab, she said. It was born in a quiet office where a baby had a fever and a father was learning how to love his child. The room fell silent. I'm not a tech expert. I was just someone who listened. And that changed everything. She stepped back. Damon stepped forward, took her hand, faced the cameras. She's not just my wife, he said. She's the reason I understand my son. Applause thundered, but the real victory came later. At home, it wasn't a mansion. Not yet. Just a quiet apartment. A bubble bottle lay tipped on its side on the carpet. Luca, now a toddler, chased bubbles across the floor, laughing like the world had nothing left to prove. Savannah sat on the rug, barefoot, hair down, eyes glowing. Damon sat beside her. She looked at him. Remember? It all started with a bottle of bubble soap. He smiled. You walked in like it was nothing. Like blowing bubbles for a crying baby was normal. For me, it was. He reached for her hand. And in that moment, there was no hierarchy, no boardroom, no label, just family, formed by choice, tested by fire, held together by something stronger than business plans. Presence. The Heart Signals launch sent ripples across the tech industry. Savannah had braced herself for ridicule, the press calling her the janitor Cinderella, tech bros whispering about Damon's midlife collapse. But none of it came. Instead, the world listened. Maybe they were tired of disruptive apps that solved problems no one had. Maybe they were ready to hear something quieter, something real. Or maybe, just maybe, the world was finally learning to value what it had always dismissed: empathy, listening, and the knowledge you don't get from a master's program. Within 6 months, Heart Signals had over 800,000 downloads. Parenting blogs called it a miracle with code. Pediatricians began referencing it in wellness visits. A national magazine ran a cover story: the CEO who learned to listen, and the woman who taught him how. Savannah didn't read it. She didn't need to. She was too busy blowing bubbles on the living room floor, one hand steadying a giggling toddler who still believed magic lived in floating soap. Luca turned 2 in spring. The celebration was simple: homemade cake, mismatched balloons, and a dozen children chasing each other around a rental play gym. Savannah wore jeans and a t-shirt. Damon carried juice boxes like a man who'd finally made peace with not being the most important person in the room. The guests weren't investors. They were neighbors, friends. A few of Savannah's old co-workers from the janitorial team who still couldn't believe the girl who cleaned floor 37 now ran her own company from it. Luca didn't care. He only wanted more cake. And that was the point. By the following year, Heart Signals had expanded internationally. What began as a prototype between a former CEO and a former janitor now had offices in Toronto, Seoul, Berlin, and Nairobi. They brought on researchers, pediatric consultants, behavioral scientists. But at the core, the algorithm still used Savannah's early insights. This is what it sounds like when a child is tired. This is what a hunger cry looks like, not just sounds like. This is what anxiety looks like before it becomes noise. They built the company on signals, not noise. Recognition followed. Naturally, a tech award here, a keynote invitation there. Eventually, an email from the White House asking if Savannah would speak at a summit on early childhood development. She almost said no. Damon talked her into it. You don't have to be polished, he told her. Just tell them the truth. So she did. On stage, in front of 3,000 people in suits and pinned conference badges, Savannah stood in a dress she'd bought off the sale rack and said, I used to clean floors in a building where no one looked down. Now I help people listen to what's beneath them. The room went still. Not quiet. Still. As if they'd remembered something they hadn't thought about in years. But for Savannah, none of it, the headlines, the accolades, the praise, compared to one specific sound. It came on a quiet night, years later. She was lying on the couch, feet propped on Damon's lap, Luca asleep down the hall. Damon was scrolling aimlessly on his phone when Luca's voice, still small, still fragile, called out in the dark. Mom. Not Savannah. Not her. Not even the lady. Just, Mom. Damon looked up. Savannah's eyes glistened. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. Life settled into something gentler. They didn't chase IPOs. They didn't sell to Amazon or Meta, despite the offers. Damon insisted on building slower, better. Savannah insisted on never becoming the kind of company that needed a PR firm to clean up its humanity. They gave free versions of the app to single parents and community centers, donated time, built curriculum, launched a feature for children with speech delays. Every quarter, they brought their entire staff together, playmats and all, for story circles. The new motto on their wall was hers. Every cry has a reason. Years passed. Lucas started preschool. Savannah stopped checking the comments on articles. Damon learned how to make French toast without Googling it. Their second child, yes, there was one, was born during a snowstorm. A girl. They named her Mira, after the Latin word for wonder. Savannah didn't go back to work right away. She didn't need to. The company, the team, the rhythm, they could survive without her for a while. But Luca, Mira, Damon, they needed her exactly where she was. Present. The thing she'd always been best at. Eventually, the industry circled back around. There was another conference. A big one. International. Glitzy. Damon didn't want to go. Savannah did. But not to be seen. To make a point. She stood on stage, not as the co-founder of a multi-million-dollar platform, not as the woman with the perfect transformation arc, but as someone who had once sat on the floor of a skyscraper, blowing bubbles for a baby no one else would hold. And she told them this. Tech is often built to scale, but the things that really matter, care, trust, presence, can't be scaled. They can only be practiced, and they're always small at first. No standing ovation, just silence. And then, slowly, a room full of people who usually clapped out of obligation began to clap out of respect. That night, Damon kissed her hand. Not for show, just because he still couldn't believe she stayed. In the end, they didn't build a unicorn startup. They built something better. A home, a family, and a company where crying was never considered a problem, but a form of communication waiting to be understood. Luca grew. Mira too. There were science fairs, scraped knees, bedtime stories, and family dinners where no one looked at their phones. Years later, when their children were older, Savannah wrote a short book. Not about success, not about tech, about listening. It became required reading in 3 early childhood education programs and was quietly passed around between young parents at playgrounds. She titled it, simply, The First Sound. The dedication read, "For those who hear a cry and don't look away, this is for you." And in the very last chapter, just before the acknowledgments, she wrote one more thing. It started with a bottle of bubble soap, and someone who believed that even in a place built on glass and silence, a crying child was still worth stopping for. The end.